Waves of attacks and counterattacks while talks continue. The same pattern is repeating in these latest round of confrontation between US and Iran. If one side escalates, the other follows suit. In the meantime, the dance of good cop and bad cop continues to dominate the narrative on both sides. Remember, US President Donald Trump is taking the hard line, but this time he's being cautious about deadlines. Donald Trump, who remember gave one deadline after another during the previous confrontation, is now saying that he does not like to give deadlines. But he's warned that Iran must behave.
Are you giving Iran a deadline before you start bombing?
I don't like giving deadlines, but they pretty much know, they know the story.
So are you
they better behave.
Now, there's no deadline for escalation, but remember the US president had earlier said that the strikes will continue until Iranian negotiators come to the table to finalize a deal. On the other hand, Vice President J.D. Vance has raised concerns over the approach of indefinite bombing. And this is where the two leaders differ. In a podcast with Joe Rogan, the American vice president said, and I quote him, "You can take away their radar, you can take away some of their drones and some of their missiles, but it's just too easy to fire at ships in the straits. So you've got to actually be willing to talk and to try to figure out the problem." Now, the Iranian side is also following a similar pattern as the US. Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei, has openly vowed to take revenge of his father's assassination. Earlier, he'd released a statement as well expressing his dissent over the Memorandum of Understanding with the US. Similarly, Iran's military command center has warned to blow up all infrastructure of West Asia if the US conducts attacks on Iran's civilian infrastructure.
Should the recent threats by the President of the United States to target the infrastructure of the Islamic Republic of Iran be carried out by that country's aggressive military, then everything that, due to Iran's restraint, has so far remained intact, namely all infrastructure in the region, will be crushed under the steel blows of the powerful armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran to such an extent that no trace of them will remain, as though they had never existed.
However, the negotiators are towing a softer line. Iran's chief negotiator, Mohammad Baghir Ghalibaf, said that his country does not welcome war and will never do it. He blamed the US for not honoring the negotiated agreement and vowed to uphold the rights of the Iranian people. Now, the statement was read by an Iranian news anchor. Take a listen.
During the negotiations, we also secured recognition of Iran's arrangements for the Strait of Hormuz by standing firm. Now that the United States, from a legal standpoint, is empty-handed, it's trying to undermine those Iranian arrangements through force. But we must stand by what we achieved so that the rights of the people are realized.
Both sides are now offering an olive branch to each other while simultaneously attacking one another. The dance of the good cop and the bad cop and the loop of escalation, talks, de-escalation and deadlock continues. But the cost of it is high, and the whole world is watching this entire uncertainty unfold. All right, let me welcome my guest on the show tonight. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis is joining us. He's a military expert and host of the Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. He's joining us live from Virginia at the moment. Colonel Davis, welcome to WION. Good to have you back on the show. My first question, will this strategy, the good cop, bad cop strategy, will this work in favor of America as far as Iran is concerned? There's been, two differing stances and two differing tones that are coming out of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. And not just right now, it's been happening for a while now. Will this strategy work for the U.S.?
I don't know that it's a good cop, bad cop so much as, at least on the American side, as it is that they're just struggling to find some kind of a strategy that everybody can get behind. Because we had this one where we were trying diplomacy. We had the ceasefire that went into effect in April, and then that turned into a blockade kind of quasi trying to get a memorandum of understanding. We finally got that. But then we didn't even come close to giving it the 60 days it was supposed to. President Trump got impatient just days into this, and he started changing the terms almost immediately and imposing things that the Iranian side was not going to agree to. And then it turned into kinetic stuff. And so now then you have Vice President Vance saying one thing and President Trump saying something different. And the real issue is, what is the America stance? Because I'm not sure even the Americans know on that. Of course, if we don't know, if we don't have a single voice, then it's going to be nearly impossible to have a diplomatic side with the other side, who also has different views within their government about what they're going to think. So right now, I don't see any pathway to a success for either party. I see a continuation of this quasi-war that's not really a ceasefire, but it's not really a full-on war.
So it's interesting, Colonel Davis, that, you and I right now are speaking about the kind of strategy that the U.S. is deploying. But my simple question is, does the U.S. even want this war to end despite domestic considerations? Because many experts around the world believe that as far as and as much as Donald Trump can stop or choke Chinese trade through the Strait of Hormuz, they will do that for the long-term benefit.
It's a valid question, because on the surface of it, the answer is unequivocally yes. Definitely the United States wants this over because it has significant negative economic ramifications for us. President Trump himself, when he signed the MOU on the 17th of June, specifically said we only had about 4 weeks of our strategic petroleum left. He specifically said we were headed towards the potential for a depression if we don't get this strait back opened up. So he seemed to be focused on it then, but then literally days later, all of a sudden now he goes back into things that undermine that very thing. Paragraph 5 is being one of the main ones, because we wrote into there, President Trump himself signed the document himself that said Iran has the administrative control over the Strait of Hormuz for those 60 days without tolls. But then literally days later, we start introducing our own system in the southern part of the Strait of Hormuz, violating that term. And then, of course, that turned into difference of opinions and violence back and forth. So one may say, okay, well, did Trump really want it over? Because doing something that early in the process makes it look like he didn't want it to succeed for whatever other reasons. And that's a valid question that it's really, I don't think anybody can answer except President Trump. Based on the evidence, we do seem to be taking action that undercuts our own position and makes it incredibly unlikely that Iran is going to submit to the things that we want them to. And therefore, we have the situation that's unsolvable at the moment.
All right, so let's wait and watch, Colonel Davis, how this moves forward. The entire world is, of course, awaiting an end to this war. Whether or not it is intended towards that direction, we'll know hopefully soon. But I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Colonel Davis, for joining us on WION and sharing your perspective.
Always my pleasure.